Yes, I am live now. Slightly a little technical problem here. It's always something. Anyhow, we'll wait a few seconds. If you are with me live, and you tried to get into the other live show, then that didn't work for some reason. But anyhow, I'm live. I hope you find me here. It's of course a little bit weird to say if you can find me on the other side because then you're not listening here, right? Does that make any sense? It probably doesn't make any sense at all. But anyhow, this is Shah with the Empowering Story Live. We had a little bit of technical difficulties to start it up. I think I'm just in time. I'm just the link that I created didn't work. So if you didn't find me, that I'm so sorry, and that you have to listen to it into the, what we call the recording. Anyhow, I hope that you enjoy the show. Every Tuesday, I am live on Facebook and on some other channels with the Empowering Story Live, which is mostly meant for women that want to move past abuse, and in specific past sexual abuse. So, if you are with me here on Facebook Live and you did actually find me, then I would enjoy it if you would give me just a little comment or a little shout out. Let me see if everything is working here. Yes, yes, yes. I am live here, and see if I'm also live in the other channels. I don't think I am, so that is probably a little bit of an issue. Just give me a second, guys, and yes. So yes, okay. So this is not working here. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Let me just make a little message here and see that live show. I'm just going to write this. So this is all live, Live show is happening on my profile, on my personal profile, and I'll post it later in this group. Okay, yeah. Okay, maybe that helps. All right, the topic of today is moving on. The topic of today is moving past your abuse and the nonsense, or maybe the sense of the power of now. Right? So the topic is, one more time, moving past your abuse and the nonsense. Or the sense of the power of now. I've talked about this before in my other live show, which we called Tell the Everyday Life Lesson. But I thought it would be interesting to look at this topic, the power of now, from the lens if you are an abuse victim. So we're going to look at that. Now, and let me start with you with some quotes to start you off and warm you a little bit up. Right, the past has no power of the present moment. That's what Eckhart Tolle say. Let's see if that is true. Realize deeply that the present moment is all you have. Make the now the primary focus of your life. Eckhart Tolle. The future depends on what we do in the present. Mahatma Gandhi. Oh, that's already a slightly different take on this. The future depends on what we do in the present. Study in the past if you want to define, study the past if you want to define the future. Confucius. So Mahatma Gandhi is saying, you need to do something now that will that depends on what you do in the future, right? And then Confucius said that you need to study the past if you want to define the future as well. So he's not even talking about the now in this case. The past is your lesson, the present is your engine, and the future is your motivation. That's unknown. So welcome to episode 15 of the Empowering Story. And today we'll talk about the sense and the nonsense of the power of now. This could easily fit, in a lot of topics, but today I really want to look at it through the lens of if you are an abuse victim. So so there are 5 things that I'm going to. Actually, there are no, there are actually 8 things that I want to, point out to begin with. So Eckhart Tolle says, the book The Power of Now was published in 1997, became almost an instant hit, but I think in the beginning of 2000 or maybe 1999, I forgot what that was. It became Eckhart Tolle was interviewed in Oprah Winfrey. In the Oprah Winfrey show at that time, that was still showing on television. Most of you still know what it is, and I think all of you know who Oprah Winfrey is. But because of that, it became The Power of Now became such a big hit, and I think there are over 3 million copies sold worldwide, and I think that's a low estimate. And there are and it became a thing. You had clubs that were working on The Power of Now. There were coaches who were jumping on it. There were actually people who called them, Power of Now gurus. And I must honestly admit that when that book came out, I at first instance I thought, oh my gosh, that is so great. And then after that, he published, I think a year or two later, he published A New Earth. And I think there's a lot to get and gain from those two books, but I must also say that if in many situations it is actually, there's a lot of things that actually doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it a little bit deeper. Now, whether you are with me on this or not, I hope you follow what I have to say about this, and then you can make up your own mind as always, right? So let me take about 8 quotes from the book, and then we start. So Eckhart Tolle says, "The present is all there is. The present moment is all there is." Now, just think about it for a moment, if that can actually be true. Happiness and inner peace can only be found in the present moment. Okay, so it all sounds very deep to me. We are far too concerned with the results and not the process we are in. Okay, that I can actually can go with quite far, actually, if I think about the coaching that I give, specifically with people who are preparing for competitions and other athletes and so on. And there are only 3 options for us to choose from, no matter the situations we are in. Okay. Most of us are rarely ever really present. Yeah, I think that's kind of true. The true cause about unhappiness, that's what he's talking about, if you're not living in the now. Life needs to be lived, but you can go through life without ever living it. Yeah, that sounds really good too. And I think that is, is a really good quote. And last but not least, when you are not living from the now, you are only affecting yourself. Or you are not only affecting yourself. That's actually, maybe. Let's see it. Then he says, by living in the current moment, we are able to experience relaxation and freedom. The worries of the past and the future becomes irrelevant. Whenever we are truly in the now, we are left free to decide how we want to feel and act and perceive the world around us. End quote, Eckhart Tolle. So what's happening here is a little bit, almost like marketing. It is giving you a promise of a concept. Do this and you get that, right? So it goes also from the point that there is a problem, right? And the problem is there are a lot of worries. And the worries are caused by the past, which is most of the time the case, so that's nothing new. And that you maybe also have worries about the future, which some people always have. We have that too. You want to stay healthy in the future, you want to save money, and so on and so on. So in essence, this is just a well-written marketing sentence, right? So by living in the current moment, that is the solution that Eckhart Tolle gave, then I solve the problem, the worries of the past and the future become irrelevant. And then he gives you a little bit about the how. So he gives you the problem, he gives the solution, and a little bit about the how. So that is typically kind of a marketing sentence, and that's actually the main reason. This quote is actually the main reason why so many people jumped onto the power of now. Because if you do that well, and then if you get the endorsement and the support of someone like Oprah Winfrey, then people start to identify themselves with that problem. And that's also what they did in the show. Who has not worries about the past, what happened in the past? Typically we get a little bit depressed about it. And who is not, a little bit anxious what will happen about in the future? So that's where anxiety is coming from. And hence, if I write a book that solves these things, then that sells like a maniac, right? Now, that doesn't mean that the book in itself and what's in there is nonsense. Now, there could be many good things in there, and I think there are, but do they always work just for this situation? So if I am an abuse victim, and I am, then I have these problems. I am worried about what happened in the past, and I got stuck in it a little bit, which we need to solve too, right? And then definitely, if it's a situation that you have not escaped from yet, you have a lot of bad worries in the future, or even if you have escaped from that situation, and many of you already are, but you deal maybe with trust issues and with shame and guilt. You have a lot of anxiety about what the future holds for us. So then that's exactly the problem that Eckhart Tolle described here, and that kind of works, right? So then you say, man, I need to read that book. So there's nothing wrong with the power of now as far as this goes, right? And it definitely made me think about a lot of things when I was reading the book. So it did something to me. So thank you for that, Mr. Tolle. In all fairness, it was for a while a big fan of it, actually, and still think there are still valuable things in it that you can read from it. The problem is that the now by itself is not nearly enough, right? And that's contradictory to what Eckhart Tolle, I don't know what he teaches now, by the way, but what he was teaching at that time. That if you can focus on the now only, all the other things disappear. And that is actually, for in my opinion, only half the story. Now, he's the best-selling author of a book that sold 3 million copies. I am not close to that, to be really honest, full disclosure. But I did write a book, and I did, and it became a bestseller. It's just not on that $3 million level yet, but who knows, right? Maybe I got invited by Oprah Winfrey. Oprah, if you're listening, I hope you do. My book is specifically geared to how to live with passion and purpose after sexual abuse, right? In that sense, it's actually already true. Actually, to be honest, I only realized now that I talk about it, because the subtitle of the book is living with passion and purpose after sexual abuse. So living is actually also projected into the future, and has something of the now in it, but then it's after abuse. So let's first explore what the now means. If you think about it deeply, it is almost more conceptual than the past and the future. And what I mean with it, because the now is a singular second. The moment that I say it, I'm already in the next second. So really to grasp what the now is, that's a little bit hard. But what we typically mean is the general now, like I'm talking to you now on Facebook, right? I'm talking to you now on a live Facebook thing on my personal profile. I'm so sorry that I am not in my other channels as I normally am, but I will post it there. So no worries if you hear this from the recording, then skip the beginning a little bit and then just listen to the content of it. So continuous time. That I think I see that. The ancient Greeks actually, they have 3 terms for time actually, and one is the quality of which is kairos. If I know my Greek really well, and then you have so in chronological time, and that is chronos. And then you also have something that's called in Greek the eternal time is aeon. So we have just time, and then we say now, but so that is slightly different. So they make a clear distinction between the quantity and the quality of time. So the quantity is chronos, so that's literally you can calculate it, and kairos is the quality of time, and they also have something like the eternal time. So so from this little, so if you think a little bit about it, then and you want to lock down what the now is, then you feel actually that I was stumbling a little bit here, just thinking and regrouping myself. I'm still, my mind is still, to be honest, living in the past. I was living in the past. My mind was still about the fact that I had some technically difficulties to start up the show. So if you just jumped in now, then you don't know why I was stumbling so much. But my mind was still a little bit occupied about what happened just a few moments ago. And so, yeah, I was for a moment not really in the present. So let's skip that part here. And continue our search if the power of now, clearly written in the book of Eckhart Tolle, if that is something that helps us overcoming sexual abuse or not, and if it helps us move past our abuse history or not. So I'm a little bit less critical than some on the power of now, but I'm still quite critical that that whole concept that of the power of now might not enough to move us past abuse, right? So in the way Eckhart Tolle writes about the power of now is that he writes about the past a little bit as a negative emotions, right? But in truth, negative emotions, they have two basic purposes. If you look at if you look at the scale of emotions, then you could actually say that every emotion also has a function. And here you come to a principle that I strongly believe in. Every emotion is actually welcome. So some people say, but anger is a bad emotion. No, anger in itself is not a bad emotion. The actions that you do because of anger, that could be bad, right? But the emotion in itself is not bad. So in general, negative emotions, they have two basic purposes. So they tell us what we want so that we can, try for it. They tell us a little bit in the past what we want or don't want. That's a negative emotion. And a negative emotion is actually rich, and in itself you find a lot of perspectives of life, and they can easily be translated into art. That's what I wrote a while ago, and it is so true. If you go to a museum or you go to other forms of expression of art, like dance, I'm a dancer. We often take negative emotions and translate that into dance. If you think about love songs, they often go about broken love. We love all these things. You think about, if you think about movies, they often go about the negative side of life, and those are the stories that we like. We don't have to get stuck in them. That's something else. But negative emotions in itself spurs a lot of perspective on life, and they also spurs a lot of outings of artistic outings, so to speak, expression of artistic well, artistically expression. Man, I'm stumbling today. It almost looked like Tolle believes. Tolle is the writer of The Power of Now, and dear Eckhart Tolle, I have the fullest respect of you. It doesn't mean that I am in full attack of you at all. It's just I put your book, and in the past I've put other books, just as a discussion in this show and in other shows. It almost looked like Eckhart Tolle believes that negative emotions are horrible, evil things, and the less we have of them, the better. And I'm not sure if that's true. I didn't talk to you, and maybe if I do, and maybe you also have changed your mind on this topic a little bit. At least if you take what he writes about, I'm sure that he has much more nuance, to be honest, because I didn't ask. But if you just look at the text itself, then it writes something like this: negativity is unnatural. Almost needless to say that I think that is nonsense, to be honest. Let's be frank here. Let's be straightforward. I'm Dutch after all. I think that is nonsense. I'm not idolizing negativity at all, of course, but just from a sheer fact that one can only understand one side, you also have to understand the other side, right? So to understand clearly what positivity is, you have to understand what negativity is as well. So, and Eckhart Tolle might agree with that. So simply put, negativity goes along with positively. You cannot have one without the other, and um, you know, you cannot up without down, so to speak, right? So you need to have that concept in your mind that everything is relative. You have a left and your right. If everything would be absolute, by the way, my next book will be about that. If everything is absolute, it doesn't work. You have no relevance to that. Everything needs to be relative, right? It's always relative. Positive is only understandable if you understand what negativity is. Yeah, so that doesn't mean that I'm a fan of negativity, not at all. But if you really want to understand, you know, what negativity is and what positivity is, you need to understand the other side. And therefore, you see that people who went through big ordeals in their life and come out of it have a deeper understanding of happiness and a deeper understanding of passion and purpose because of what they have been through in life. And life throws us all these hissy fits, right? And abused people like myself, they have been maybe going through things that we don't want to wish for anyone to go through. But unfortunately, it happens. And maybe we can create a future where these things are banned from the world. And I'm doing my best to build on that future. But there will always be things in life that causes ordeals and causes roadblocks and gets us stuck and stuff like that. And knowing that there is another side, is helping to heal. So if you are stuck in your negativity, that is often because you cannot see that there is a positive future for you out there. So if I am living in the present and I'm depressed and I have no belief in the future that the future actually can help me forward, then actually I have a greater problem, right? So in the book Eckhart Tolle, he thinks that if you live in the now, that automatically you are a positive person. No, I could be, because of my abuse, become in a very depressive state, which is my current state then. So I'm in the now. One of the things that helps me forward, and this happened in my life, is knowing or believing at least there is a brighter future out there. And I was explaining this principle to someone who said, Jean, how do you survive sometimes these pure negative emotions that we have caused by our abuse, and that could be suicidal thoughts, could be very depressive. And I told them about this. I said, the first time that happened to me, those dark thoughts, I just did not know what happened to me. I thought like, oh my gosh, like, and this is the end of the world, at least the end of my world. Um, but then what happened to me after that, sometimes with the help of some friends, sometimes with the help of some professionals, doesn't really matter. What happened, I got out of that, you know? And so then the next time it happened to me, I started to recognize what state I was in, and I could accept that state way better because I knew at some point in time this will be over. When it happened to me the first time, I thought it didn't go over. So embracing your current state, if that was meant with the power of now, I am all for that, right? Embrace it first, but also have a good eye on the future as well. And it has two effects. So we go back, maybe we go that, maybe see that a little bit later when I talk about the empowering story. But there are two things actually that could happen here, is because that that the anxiety that you have or the depressive feeling that you have is actually becoming automatically a lot less. Um, because everything will change at some point in time, and at the moment that you are deeply in it, it doesn't feel like that, but once you gain that knowledge that it actually will, it is okay. Does that make sense? So when it rains, you know that the rain will stop at some point in time. When it gets dark, you know that. But I can only imagine that if something happened to you for the first time, you don't know that. You don't know that it will go over. And the first time that you have a pain because of something, and depression is in fact a sort of a pain, you don't know that it will go over. Does that make sense? Um, so um, so when you reach, so then he says, when you have reached a certain degree of presence, you don't need negativity anymore to tell you what is needed in your life situation. Well, I could find myself in that a little bit. The wise can experience any negative emotion. They simply do not identify themselves with emotion. They take it in as an important information. Now, that I totally agree, because I wrote that. So in my book, Broken Silence, I refer to this. We can tell our stories, we know our stories, we even can experience it, but we don't identify anymore ourselves with our story. What I mean with it, in our stories of abuse, we don't have to. We don't have to say, we are our story. I and for a while I identified myself with the story too much, that I only positioned myself as the person that is a victim of abuse, instead of that it happened to me in the past. Right? Does that make sense? So in that sense, you need to be able to get loose from the past. Yes, you need to let go of the past, but doesn't mean that you can completely forget it. I even think that it's unhealthy if you do. So negative things will happen to all of us, no matter what degree of presence we have reached. It doesn't really matter, you know. It's what we will do with it that will matter. So if you think that because you are more in the present and you have a more positive way of looking at life, which I typically have, that doesn't mean that negative thing doesn't happen to you. It might mean that you are able to deal with negative things in your life different than people who have a slightly different mindset. Does that make sense? So then here it comes the next thing. Tole also claims being aware of pain dissolves it in the presence. Well, I think that's wrong. It typically does not such thing. Metaphorization dissolves pain far more effectively. So what I mean with that is, in fact, when you teach about overcoming pain, which I do, I always say to go into the pain and listen to it, and it will lose the worst part of the sting, so to speak. It loses its power over you. So whether that's truly physical pain or whether that's mental pain, trying to avoid that emotion, the bodily emotion, the somatic emotion, or the mental emotion that you have, try to avoid it. Say, no, I need to live in the present. It's not that's an emotion from the past. You're actually not listening to the pain, and going to the pain and listening to it and sit in that pain for a moment. That's where the power of now can come in, right? For a moment, that actually is pretty healing, and that can tell you so much about your physical and specifically about mental pain. Yeah, even a terrible disease or struggle can be translated into art, and has been, and when it becomes meaningful. Right, so you can also use the pain that you went through, even if you cannot dissolve it from your body, but you can still transform it into something that has way more power into the world than just trying to avoid and see that pain. So you see painters with handicaps. I see dancers with handicap, and become so passionate about the things that they used to be able to do, but they can talk about it with so much more knowledge now, because they have this handicap, maybe after an accident, maybe after some sort of a disease, but they knew how to transform that pain in something, um, in something positive. So they don't avoid it at all. They actually go straight into it. Um, you know, once you know how to basic how basic dysfunction operate, there is no need to explore all this countless manifestation. No need to make it into a complex personal problem. People don't make it into a complex personal problems. Most people actually have such problems which they currently um, try to be their best to ignore and shove it under the rug. They would benefit by addressing them through exploration, expression in art and or therapy. Brushing them aside in the same so-called spirituality is, in my mind, a little bit stupid. Yeah. So immediately looking at it and trying to transform it. Okay, this we're living now in the now, and we don't have the pain because the pain is in the past. That actually doesn't do anything. Actually, just going and looking at the pain and trying to do something with it, right? Trying to make, for instance, a poem from the pain that you had, or trying to make a musical piece from the pain that you had, or trying to make a dance which from the pain that you had, that is actually transformational. So going back to your pain can actually, and so to solve the worries and the depression and all the things that you feel from the pain, and in this case the abuse, that's what I'm talking about, actually to do that and then transform it is way more powerful than just thinking that that belongs only in the past. Does that make sense? So the transformation of pain is, and that's what we do in the empowering story, in the empowering story method that we have developed, is we help you transform that pain in something that, and it could be go all the way into something that is art, and art is a wide word in this case, right? If I write a poem, I don't think I ever will publish it, but I wrote many poems about the things that I felt and were painful to me, and that in itself releases energy, and it transforms that negative energy into something that you could arguably say is something positive. Does that make sense? So I'm a little bit harsh here um, by calling that stupidity, but I think that's a misuse of spirituality, and that's definitely a misuse of the power of now. So the limitation of living in the now. Just as there are limits to the stories we tell about ourselves, there are also limits to the now. For one, there are aspects of experience and of ourselves that we either cannot or will not see in the heat of the moment, right? I can truly, utterly certain about those things because we sometimes say that, right? Like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. But now on hindsight, on hindsight, I look at it completely different. I have a different perspective. Now, so in the heat of the moment, that we say, now, I could totally might argue here, like, if you're really present, you have less of that heat of the moment. Sure, I think that may be possible. I just don't think it's very realistic. Sometimes when we are on the road and we don't know why, but we are a little bit more stressed, someone cuts us off, and in the heat of the moment, I raise my finger and I'm angry, and maybe I even chase it, which is, of course, dumb if I would truly, let it go. But in the heat of the moment, which is the now, right? So that's that, and then in retrospect, I would say, man, I could have react slightly different. Um, even worse is that over time we sometimes gain more experience and gain also more knowledge about past moments. So the past moments, using what I do in the future, can be used as a huge learning objective. Only focusing on that single point of the now does not do that at all, right? So it is often better to do nothing in the now instead of everything, right? So sometimes it is really, if you're in an argument or something, just let it go. You're letting go of the now is very often way more effective than only embracing it. So I have a few friends, and they at the moment they are actually suffering from a very bad strand of the flu, and yeah, they have to let it go. They have to let that that sickness go through them for a while, and that's painful. But to immediately do something with it is not always healthy, right? Um, so So we always say on hindsight everything is 2020, and there is a lot of truth in that. So hindsight is from now is in the future, right? Sometimes we say that, we see a problem like now, and then we say, let's wait a little bit. Maybe, the time will tell us a little bit more what to do in this moment. Yeah, there are problems that you have to solve immediately right now, but most problems actually, you can actually take time to solve them. So the future will help you to solve the problems of now. To immediately think that you have to solve it right now is not a good actually attitude, and a lot of people who do that have a lot of anxiety if they cannot wait, if they cannot exercise patience, which is something in the future. They actually get more anxiety of trying to live in the now than if they just accept that there is a future for them as well. Does that make sense? um, the past is as important as the now is. So I rarely think of my past and have little use for it. That's what Eckhart Tolle is right. No, that's so not true. There's so much use. There's so much good in the past, right? We often think about the past as a bad thing, but there's of course a lot of good things in the past. It's the past that created the bondage of friendship. It's the past that created the bondage of you know, of love. So there's a lot of things in the past that are super powerful and we can still do, and we have to remind ourselves some things. Sometimes we also took some decisions in the past that we need to remind ourselves of why we were doing them, because in the now we completely forgot them, right? So focusing on good things that happened in the past may also help us remember that although we may be in a bad place now, our life isn't essentially bad or meaningless at all. And I have that sometimes, right? There are days that I think, man, this is not working. But then I remember the feedback that I have from some clients and how I help them, or at least I was witnessing when I was working them, how they projected themselves forward. And I think there is a meaning of the things that I do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's a lot of meaning in the past, and to remember yourself, or to remind yourself, that would be better English, to remind yourself of the good things that you did in the past helps you actually to find motivation to go forward if you are stuck, right? To only concentrate then if you are stuck on the now, not very helpful. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I want to say. That so it's very natural, and it's something, there's so much joy in reviewing the past, if for lessons, for wisdom, for anchoring our identities, and even or healing old scars, of course. Something. We do that. We revisit the past, and sometimes we revisit the past because there's new knowledge and there's new facts coming bare to life that we can revisit the past and look at them at an entirely different way. And I know that my dad, he was stuck in the past, and because his family in the war, something really bad happened to them, and let me not completely explain it, but he didn't had all the facts. And then years and years later, he was already in his 70s. My dad passed away last year, but when he was already in his 70s, um, he met at a party. He met some people who were also in that situation, and they had new facts for him. So that was more than 30 years after the fact. They had new facts for him, and he had to change his whole perspective of what happened in that situation, and it helped him moving forward quite a bit. So saying that you have to solve that in the now, yeah, in the now when he was 70, but he could probably have done if he was not so obsessed with getting stuck into this is what it is, and that's but if he would have maybe did some homework, if he would have been actively more saying maybe there's more to the story that I've been through, then I think maybe that would have been a wiser decision than only trying to avoid the past and take that as a 100% fact. um, and then here is the thing that I say, we are not animals. We can live in the futures. animals typically live only in the past. They have very little memory, and they have habits that they have created over time, so they know how to solve a couple of things, like how to get food, how to hunt, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that is, you could say, that are past memories and that they convert into habits. But most of the things, it's all driven about, I'm hungry right now and I need to get food. But so I'm saying this loosely because there are some animals who knows how to store food, and so they plan for the future. They just have very little knowledge. It's more like they do it from a habit point of view. We can plan the future, right? We can do things. We can take decisions that, conscious decisions that alter the course of our future, right? Yeah, that we have to take those decisions right now. That is kind of clear, right? But if we don't have a view or of the future, how would you take those decisions, right? So think about the future. And it can also instill hope if you talk about people who are, like, again, if they are sick or they are depressed. If you cannot talk to them about the future and you only have to talk about the now, they probably would tell to you right now, saying, "Hey, Sean, I feel very crappy right now," right? So you can tell them stories about the future. You can let them see how other people went through and dealt with their abuse, and that is in store for them as well. Yeah. So a major difference between humans and animals is that we live in the future too. We make plans and we have hopes, and that's a major reasons why our lives have value, right? We get a lot of value because we can make plans and have hopes. So bottom line, we need to see things in perspective, and we can see the now in perspective of the past or the future. Yeah, the now is important, but it only gets true meaning if you can see it through the lens of the past or the future. At least that's what I think. Needless to say that we can also be too occupied with either the past or the future. Yes, then you live completely out of the now. That would not be a good thing. But this is also true for people who are too obsessed with the now. So that balances out and have closed their mind for the past or the future, and it will come back to you. And I want to close with that because I had at least two clients who were living in the now, and even psychologically, their past was completely blocked because traumatic experience, and it started suddenly coming back, their abuse trauma. And so you cannot just ignore the past. That is just not wise, right? You cannot only live in the now, and you can definitely also not ignore the future because that wouldn't, then nothing would change. So, dear Eckhart Tolle, I think there's a lot of good in your books, and I will take those with me, which is probably also true of mine. Not everything in there is helpful for everyone, but to be honest, I think the power of now is not so powerful at all. It's just a nice way to say it, the power of now. So this was Jean, and I'm really sorry. This was not my best, the empowering story show, I guess, because there was a lot of technical things. I have that a little bit. I'm not even know why I do these things because I always have these little technical difficulties. But I love it. I hope you love my show too, and I hope it helps you. Most of you probably, because of what it is, see it in recording, but that doesn't mean that you cannot contact me if you have any questions. Just write me a chat or put it in the comments of this show, and then specifically if it comes about today's shows, that is there nonsense or is there sense in using the power of now, at least the way Mr. Eckhart Tolle wrote about it, in going past your sexual abuse. Yes, there are definitely things that you can use from it, but I do think that you also have to be very careful because there are a lot of things in there that, in my mind, actually are not so helpful at all and should be addressed quite differently. So in this show, I try to go into that just because of the popularity of the power of now. Yes. So write me a comment whether you agree or not agree. It's I just like to hear your feedbacks. I'll be back next week, and I'll hope and promise. Well, I cannot promise anything because you never know what the future has in store for you. But I'll be back next week on Tuesday, 12 o'clock, with another The Empowering Story live and a new subject. We're getting close to Christmas, so probably it will be my Christmas show next week, and do a couple of things with that as we move forward. With that, I'm saying I wish you a really good week, and I say to you, bye bye.